Rain taps against the rusted guard towers like a slow, mocking drumbeat. Mud churns beneath trembling knees as a long row of SS men lower their heads, uniforms soaked, breaths sharp in the cold morning air. US soldiers advance in a tight formation, boots sinking, rifles rising, jaws clenched. The smell hits them first. Not mud. Not rain. Something far heavier. Something that sticks to the throat, a mix of gunpowder, decay, and the stinging iron scent of bodies left unburied. One SS guard whispers a prayer. Another swallows hard, eyes darting toward the barbed wire. There's nowhere to run. The Americans don't speak. Their silence cuts deeper than any shout. Then a single voice erupts from somewhere in the chaos, raw, furious, instinctive. Hold your line. Rifles snap upward. A few SS men beg. One insists he only followed orders. Another shakes so hard he almost collapses into the mud. But the US soldiers have just come from the railway siding, where they found thousands of corpses packed in boxcars like discarded cargo. They've seen the skeletal figures stumbling from barracks, arms raised, unsure if liberation is real. One soldier, barely 20, whispers through clenched teeth. After what we just saw, no more talking. A trigger tightens. A heartbeat stops. The moment explodes. But the impact never comes. The screen cuts to black. Because this execution, this line of kneeling men, is only the beginning. And among those guards were names soaked in terror: Schuttle, Wicker, Weiss, men whose crimes would shock even hardened veterans. The gates of Dachau groan as they are pushed wide, metal grinding like a wounded animal. American troops move in cautiously, rifles tracking every shadow. The air feels heavier here, thick, stale, suffocating, as if the camp itself refuses to breathe. Nothing moves at first. No shouts. No gunfire. Only the quiet hum of dread. Then, a figure stumbles out of a doorway. Bare feet. Sunken cheeks. Eyes wide with something between hope and terror. Behind him, more prisoners emerge in slow, shaky lines, unsure if the soldiers before them are real or another trick. Their striped uniforms cling to bones. Their ribs press against skin like bars of a cage. A sergeant lifts his hand. Stay behind us. Stay back. He's not barking an order, he's steadying his own shaking voice. To the left, US scouts search the administration yard. They find ammunition crates dumped in a hurry. Abandoned rifles. Blood smeared on a wall. Signs of men who ran, or men who didn't get the chance. Then a shout cuts across the yard. More guards, front tower. A cluster of SS soldiers climbs down with their hands raised, hoping surrender will save them. Among them is a young man with a boyish face, Heinrich Wicker, who hours earlier tried negotiating a peaceful handover. Now, even he trembles, knowing the rules have changed. Because the Americans haven't seen everything yet. Just beyond the gate, a path leads toward the railway siding. And down that path lies the sight that will push the soldiers past the edge of restraint. And unleash the chaos history tried to forget. The first gunshot cracked not from discipline, but from rage. A rage born in the moment American soldiers stepped inside Dachau and saw what no human mind could brace for. Bodies piled like refuse. Prisoners so starved they seemed more spirit than flesh. Boxcars filled with corpses left to rot in the sun. The stench, the silence, the sheer scale of cruelty, each detail fused into a single, overwhelming realization. This was evil, industrialized. Men of the 45th and 42nd Infantry Divisions, hardened by months of combat, felt something inside them fracture. These were not rookies. They had fought in Anzio, Sicily, the Vosges. They had seen friends torn apart by artillery, villages burned to ash, civilians caught in the crossfire. But nothing, compared to Dachau. When they rounded up the SS guards, some still wearing immaculate uniforms, others pretending to be innocent laborers, the contrast was too much to bear. The guards stood rigid, eyes cold, offering excuses, denying everything. Behind the Americans, prisoners cried out in hoarse, broken voices, pleading, pointing, begging for justice. The tension snapped. A machine gunner, shaking with fury, opened fire. A burst of .30 caliber rounds ripped through the line of captured SS men. Screams erupted. Some guards fell instantly, others collapsed clutching wounds, crawling through grass stained red. More US soldiers joined in, some shouting to stop, others too consumed by what they had witnessed to care. Chaos surged like a wave. In those minutes, a battlefield instinct fused with moral outrage. Right and wrong blurred. Discipline wavered. And for the first and only time in the European theater, American troops carried out a spontaneous execution fueled not by orders, but by the unbearable truth of what they had just walked through. The first burst of gunfire should have been the end of it. A brief, tragic snap of fury after an unthinkable discovery. But Dachau was a pressure chamber, and once the seal broke, the surge was impossible to contain. Word of the massacre spread through the compound, American soldiers shouting, prisoners screaming, SS guards collapsing in the dirt. The air crackled with panic, vengeance, and a justice no court could ever mete out fast enough. A group of US soldiers stormed toward the coal yard, where dozens more SS men had been assembled under guard. Some of these soldiers had walked through the infamous death train moments earlier, stepping over hundreds of decomposing bodies left to rot after weeks without food or water. Their boots were still smeared with the evidence. Their faces were pale, trembling, distorted with disbelief. As they reached the yard, the prisoners erupted. Survivors who could barely stand dragged themselves forward, pointing with shaking hands at the guards they recognized, the beaters, the executioners, the men who laughed while others starved. Their cries, hoarse, desperate, primal, broke whatever restraint remained. Machine guns were set up. Someone shouted a warning, but it was swallowed by the noise. The firing began again, long, sustained bursts that echoed off the concrete and sent birds scattering from the rooftops. SS guards threw themselves to the ground, some raising their arms, others curling into the dirt as bullets tore through the ranks. Amid the chaos, a few American officers tried to regain control, shouting orders, grabbing rifles, pushing men back. But for crucial minutes, Dachau had become a place where command structure dissolved under the weight of what soldiers had seen. It was no longer a liberation. It was a reckoning. What followed inside Dachau was neither organized battle nor controlled justice. It was something raw, frantic, and impossible to fully reconstruct, a collision of collapsing authority, erupting vengeance, and human emotion pushed far beyond its threshold. In this chaotic middle, the camp seemed to fall into a strange, terrifying in-between realm where no one was fully in command, and everyone was reacting at once. American soldiers moved in every direction, some trying to secure the camp, others tending to survivors, others still hunting down SS men who had shed their uniforms and tried to hide among the prisoners. Every few minutes, another discovery triggered another eruption, a room filled with abused bodies, a torture chamber disguised as a medical office, a shed stacked with emaciated corpses. Each revelation tightened the coil inside men who were already trembling from shock. Prisoners, suddenly freed yet still starving and delirious, surged through the compound like a tide without a channel. Some collapsed from exhaustion, others grabbed improvised weapons, shovels, rocks, pieces of broken furniture, and sought out the guards who had tormented them. Their cries mixed with the barked orders of American officers, the shouts of soldiers, and the clatter of weapons being loaded and unloaded in frantic hands. In the confusion, rumors spread like wildfire, that SS men were escaping, that some had opened fire, that pockets of resistance were forming. Even unconfirmed whispers sent soldiers sprinting, rifles raised, adrenaline spiking. The camp, already a place built on terror, became an arena of uncontrolled human reaction. Rage, justice, confusion, and trauma all collided at once, creating a frantic middle chapter where no one could tell who was acting on orders, and who was acting on instinct. As the chaos surged through Dachau, one final pocket of resistance ignited the most violent moment of the day, an event now half remembered, half legend, buried beneath layers of conflicting testimony. In a remote corner of the camp, a cluster of SS guards had barricaded themselves inside a utility building, cornered by the sudden collapse of the perimeter and the swarm of liberated prisoners hunting for tormentors. Whether they intended to fight, surrender, or simply hide remains uncertain. But what happened next would be remembered as the camp's final spasm of violence, a last stand that sealed their fate. When a squad of American soldiers approached, they were met with movement inside the darkened building, shadows shifting, metal clattering, a door swelling with pressure from within. In the hysteria of the moment, the Americans believed they were under threat. Some swore later that a shot rang out from inside, others insisted it was the echo of distant gunfire. But to men already stretched beyond human endurance, the possibility of resistance was enough. Grenades were pulled. Rifles were raised. Commands were barked over the roar of prisoners screaming for retribution. A blast shattered the door, and the room erupted in smoke and splinters. American soldiers surged in, firing into the haze. SS guards fell back, some clutching rifles, others unarmed, all consumed by the violent collapse of a regime that had thrived on brutality. When the shooting finally stopped, the silence was jarring. The smoke drifted upward. Lifeless bodies lay scattered across the floor, men who had once wielded absolute power now reduced to the same helpless stillness they had imposed on thousands. This was the final moment of Dachau's terror. Its last defenders had fallen, not with honor, but with the legacy they had built. When the smoke cleared, Dachau was unrecognizable. The once imposing camp, designed for control and intimidation, now lay in silence. Barbed wire sagged. Guard towers loomed like hollow sentinels. Ash and mud mixed in the courtyards, mingling with the faint, lingering scent of gunfire and human suffering. Survivors stumbled through the grounds, eyes wide, hands trembling, some pointing to the exact spot where their tormentors had fallen. Others sat in stunned silence, unable to process the sudden reversal of power, the sudden liberation, and the chaotic, brutal justice meted out in the first hours. American soldiers moved among them, trying to restore order while grappling with their own shock. Reports would later describe their faces as pale, haunted, men who had seen too much, yet acted with instinct rather than strategy. Names like Vincent Schuttle, Martin Weiss, Klaus Schilling, Engelbert Nidm, Frederick Roeth, and Gore Shalom would echo through the camp and later through history. Some had been executed on the spot, others would face trials at Landsberg prison. But for many of the soldiers and prisoners that day, there was no formal justice. Only immediate, raw reckoning. The liberation exposed not just the horrors of Dachau, but the depths of human cruelty and the extremes of human response. Thousands had survived years of systemic terror, only to witness their oppressors brought down in moments of fury and confusion. The camp's liberation would spark debate for decades, about revenge, morality, and the psychological toll of seeing mass atrocity firsthand. Dachau stood as a silent witness to both the Nazis' crimes and the desperate, visceral justice that erupted in their final hours. And while the executions were only one chapter of its story, they became the part most easily forgotten, a shadowed reckoning, hidden in photographs, fading memories, and the whispered testimonies of those who lived to tell the tale. The gates of Dachau remain silent now. The echoes of gunfire, screams, and orders have faded, leaving only the weight of what was witnessed that April morning. Survivors walk the grounds in memory, tracing the paths once patrolled by their tormentors. The prisoners who lived recall the faces of the guards, their cruelty, their arrogance, their fear, as clearly as they remember the fear that gripped their own hearts. And the Americans who fired those rifles, who acted on instinct and outrage, carry the images of that day into eternity, lines of kneeling men, mud-streaked faces, and the unbearable truth of human evil confronted directly. The executions were only one response to years of unimaginable suffering. They were raw, chaotic, and controversial. But they also tell us something undeniable. When the machinery of terror collapses, ordinary people are forced into extraordinary decisions. Decisions that blur the lines between justice and vengeance, discipline and instinct, right and wrong. Today, the world remembers Dachau not only as a site of horror, but as a place where the last acts of a brutal regime collided with the shock and rage of those who survived, and those who liberated them. The names of Vincent Schuttle, Martin Weiss, Klaus Schilling, Engelbert Nidm, Frederick Roeth, and Gore Shalom are etched into history, their fates intertwined with the chaos that marked the camp's liberation. If you were standing there, in that rain-soaked courtyard, seeing the culmination of years of cruelty, what choice would you have made? Could you have held your rifle steady, or would your hands have acted before your mind could answer? Dachau reminds us that history is never abstract. It is lived, it is felt, and its shadows demand to be remembered.